Today we will continue our discussion of Raheem Kassam's book No-Go Zones, how Sharia law is coming to a neighborhood near you. We will now have a look at Sweden, which is the country in which I spent my first 24 years. As a student in Uppsala in the mid to late 1990s, I heard about social unrest in the suburb of Gottsunda, but I never visited the area and I never saw any violence or the causes of violence in the city, except for the last summer I spent there, which was in 1998. One day when I wanted to go to the post office on the other side of the street to mail something, this was back in the days when there were still post offices in Sweden, before they closed all the offices and replaced them with a guy sitting at a small table at the entrance to the local supermarket. There was a sign on the glass door saying "closed due to robbery." It felt as being suddenly transferred to the American Wild West of the 1880s. 2 weeks later, the tobacconists on the other side of the second street I was living at a three-street crossing was also robbed. That was 20 years ago. Since then, crime has exploded in Sweden. Before going to Sweden, Raheem Kassam didn't want to believe there were actually no-go zones in the country. Like most people living in other Western countries, he imagined Sweden as a northern paradise, filled with beautiful blondes, the land of Ikea, ABBA and lingonberries. How could there be any crime in such a country? The one thing that you definitely should not do if you want to keep this ideal image of a Tolkienesque Shire is to visit the Swedish suburbs, with their grey, soulless heaps of concrete and glass, as Kassam puts it. In certain streets you feel as if you were somewhere in the Middle East. There are mobs of migrant youths attacking police and journalists and mugging retired people for drug money. A foreigner told Kassam that he had declined an offer of free government housing in Rinkeby, a Stockholm suburb, because he didn't feel safe there. Murders went up from 179 to 317 per year between 1995 and 2014 in Sweden, and in 2014 alone, the murder rate increased by 26%. The violence is linked to gangs from the Balkans and the Middle East fighting for control of the drug trade. A lot of firearms were smuggled into Sweden in the 1990s at the time of the wars in former Yugoslavia. There have been border controls only for about 2 years. Since 2005, there have been no statistics on immigration and violent crime in Sweden. The establishment is afraid of what will happen if the government discloses data on rapes and sexual harassment. 17% of the population are of foreign origin, compared to 54% of people serving time in prison. Personally, I suspect that the percentage of foreigners in Swedish prisons is higher. Here in Germany, foreign-born people who have attained German citizenship are being classified as Germans in the statistics. When police go to these troubled suburbs, nowadays they have to send 2 or 3 units. One unit stays to guard the police cars to prevent them from being destroyed. Immigrants throw hand grenades at police, and they try to prevent the fire brigade and ambulances from entering the area by throwing stones. They sabotage their vehicles, assault the personnel and block their cars from getting out. Postmen are being harassed while delivering the mail. The joint Swedish-Danish postal delivery company PostNord has stopped delivering to 200 addresses in Hjulsta, Rinkeby, because of fear for the safety of its employees. Women are being told in the street to cover their hair and stay at home, and they take care not to leave their homes after 9 p.m. Immigrants often settle their own problems and disputes in accordance with Sharia law. There are a lot of crimes related to honor, including honor-related killings. Anti-Semitism is growing day by day, and the Simon Wiesenthal Center has issued a warning for Jews visiting Malmö. Sweden is accepting the highest number of refugees and migrants in relation to the size of the population in the whole of the Western world. In 2016 alone, Sweden accepted 51,000 Syrians, although their country of origin is almost 2,000 miles away. They, meaning mainly men abandoning their families as well as their country, journeyed through Turkey and passed a number of safe countries to come to this welfare paradise in the north. Malmö's population has doubled due to mass migration. Everyone who comes to Sweden seeking asylum is considered a refugee, although many are not fleeing from war zones or persecution because of things like religion. They are coming for the welfare and the high standard of living. However, a lot of migrants diverge from their supposed route and disappear. They never show up at asylum or processing centers upon arrival. Here in Germany, 130,000 of the migrants arriving in 2015 failed to register. They remain in the country without papers. The results are ghettoization, mass unemployment, criminality and exploitation of the new arrivals. Human rights activists arguing for open borders are in reality supporting criminal gangs that profit from the newcomers, according to Kazan. Young foreigners are scarcely exposed to Swedish culture, laws, language, or even its native people. Immigrants are not encouraged to learn Swedish. Like in Molenbeek in Belgium, in Swedish no-go zones, the outside walls and balconies are littered with satellite dishes. Immigrants don't watch Swedish television. Many prefer drug dealing or human trafficking to honest work because of the fast money and, presumably, the high taxes. And because of the generous welfare system, they see no point in getting up early and spending little time at home, and consequently they sit for hours on ending cafes in the no-go zones. Only 500 of the 163,000 people applying for asylum in Sweden in 2015 had found work by May 2016, a success rate of 0.3%. The rest live on welfare. Immigration policies have created a new underclass, but to the leftists, these people are expendable. There is a booming black market which poses a big problem for a high-tax society with a gigantic welfare state. Serious business is unable to compete with the low prices on the black market, and so they disappear from the areas. Mass immigration has led to an enormous strain on healthcare, social security, the police, retirement pensions, etc. The Swedish police force is in a crisis. 80% of all police officers are considering giving up their jobs because of the increasing danger. A former police officer said she felt safer in Sudan than in some of Sweden's suburbs. Many have already resigned. 3 police officers are leaving the force every day, with the result that the police is now unable to travel to the call-outs and to investigate crimes. The reports of sexual assaults and rape started to rise drastically in 2012. Since 1975, the number of reported rapes have gone up by nearly 1,500%. Already in 2010, that is before the drastic increase, Sweden had the highest number of rapes in the world behind South Africa and Botswana. Thus, the rumor of being the rape capital of the West is not unfounded. Sexual offences are most common in the public space. There have been numerous reports of sexual assaults at public baths and at street festivals. Most of the attackers are unknown to the victims. Politicians and government officials still deny the existence of no-go zones, Kazam says. Together with the media, they paint rosy pictures of Malmö and other troubled cities while ignoring facts established by local police. In March 2017, it was revealed that Sweden's Minister for Employment and Integration, Ylva Johansson, had been using selective rape statistics in claiming that the level of rape was not high and that it had decreased, statements made to the BBC. In fact, between 2015 and 2016 alone, rapes increased by 13%. According to a Swedish war correspondent, today the Iraqi city of Mosul is safer than Stockholm for women. Adult immigrants lying about their age have been allowed to reside in underage migrant centers in spite of reports of rapes and other crimes, and authorities have refused to release the identity of adult migrants committing crimes at the migrant centers to protect them from persecution. People who try to speak out about the problems are immediately labeled racists, and there is hardly any discussion at all about radical Islam. Instead, the city of Lund outside Malmö launched a program to rehabilitate former ISIS fighters and other extremists with housing, employment, education and financial support, Kassam writes. In a number of cases, the Swedish police has kept silent about sexual assaults against underaged Swedish girls, for example at street festivals. The biggest Swedish newspapers too failed to report on these issues, although they had access to the information. They defended themselves by blaming the police for failing assistance and communication. Attackers have had their identities suppressed so as not to inflame the migration debate, if there can be any talk about debate at all. Police employees admit they are afraid of talking about these issues. According to Kassam, the problems in the no-go zones, drugs, rapes, police assaults, etc., were created in large part by state-sponsored multiculturalism. Failing border control for decades has led to these ghettoized communities that the state supports with generous welfare payments and socialist lecturing. Since Kassam published his book in August 2017, the situation has become even more alarming. Swedish police are now recruiting immigrants in the no-go zones to help them out, which is not just a sign of the fact that the police force is unable to handle the situation on their own. It also raises the question of whether the police are supporting criminals in controlling other criminals. Immigration costs the Swedish state around 100 million Swedish crowns per day, which is roughly about 10 million euros. This summer there were reports of drought in Sweden and of the increasing problem of wildfires, which caused a lot of damage. The government claimed it had no money to invest in special airplanes for fighting these forest fires, because such a plane costs 50 million crowns, which is half of what the government spends on immigration every day. In his 3 hours long lecture on Sweden from this July, Stéphane Molyneux said the Swedish left wants gender politics as kindergarten, pride parades, immigration of adult so-called children, and rehabilitation of mass murderers and terrorists. Most leftists have no contact with immigrants at all, which is certainly true not just for Sweden but for all countries, and he accused the left of taking a colonial perspective on immigrants. These are their immigrants, they must vote for the left, and if they run away from the plantation, in this case the party, they must be whipped back. Leftist politics makes people feel good, but it doesn't solve any problems. It just makes things worse.